Myeongdong is known today as one of Seoul's busiest shopping districts, a neon-lit magnet for tourists, street vendors, fashion boutiques, and cosmetic giants. But before the rise of global retail chains, before the boom of K-pop fandoms and TikTok influencers, Myeongdong had another name whispered quietly among locals. They called it his territory. The man they meant was Shin Sang-hyun, a former military sergeant, a streetwise tactician, and eventually the feared boss of one of Korea's most notorious crime syndicates, the Shin Sang-hyun. His story is not only one of violence and power, but also of how a criminal organization came to control one of Seoul's most economically vital neighborhoods, not through chaos, but through calculated rule. To understand how Shin Sang-hyun came to dominate Myeongdong, you have to rewind to the post-Korean War era. Seoul was rebuilding from the ground up. Entire neighborhoods had been reduced to rubble, and government control was weak at the street level. In this vacuum of authority, the strong filled the space, and Shin Sang-hyun was nothing if not strong. A veteran with a commanding presence and a strict sense of hierarchy, Shin used his military discipline to assemble a group of young enforcers, men who had grown up in poverty, often with nothing to lose. To them, he offered money, respect, and most importantly, structure, the kind of loyalty the government couldn't buy. Shin Sang-hyun began as a local gang operating protection rackets, but unlike the chaotic street brawlers of the time, they ran their operations with cold efficiency. Businesses paid a monthly fee, not out of fear, but out of expectation. If you were robbed, Shin Sang-hyun handled it. If a rival gang tried to set up shop, they were driven out. In a twisted way, Shin's men acted as unofficial law enforcement. By the late 1960s, the group wasn't just protecting businesses, they were controlling them. Myeongdong's open markets, nightclubs, gambling dens, and even some small banks were quietly under their thumb. If a business wanted to open or expand in the district, it had to go through Shin Sang-hyun. If you needed permits expedited or competition removed, you knew who to speak to. Shin Sang-hyun earned the nickname the Emperor of Myeongdong, and it wasn't ironic. He dressed the part, often seen in pressed suits and polished shoes. He commanded respect not only from his crew, but also from the neighborhood's elders. Local politicians sometimes turned a blind eye, and business owners, many of whom relied on his protection, often thanked him in envelopes, not words. But power invites conflict. By the early 1970s, rival factions were rising. The Yang Uni family, led by Cho Yang-un, began to expand into Seoul's lucrative districts. Tensions flared, and in 1975, violence erupted in what became one of the most infamous gang confrontations in Korean history,
the Savoy Hotel incident. It began as a business meeting. Representatives from several factions gathered to negotiate construction contract control in a redevelopment project. But it quickly turned into an ambush. Cho's men attacked with knives and blunt weapons. Shin Sang-hyun members were injured, and Shin Sang-hyun's influence was suddenly in question. But Shin didn't cower. Retaliation came swiftly. He ordered a counterattack through one of his most trusted enforcers, a man named Kim Tae-chun, who would later become the infamous boss of Bumso Bangpa. Kim reportedly stabbed a rival gang leader in a carefully planned hit. The message was clear. Shin might be aging, but he was far from done. While other gangs expanded into drugs and overseas ventures, Shin Sang-hyun stayed territorial. Their wealth came from tightly controlled rackets, gambling operations, loan sharking, and blackmail. They didn't need to spread nationwide. Myeongdong was worth millions on its own. One of the syndicate's most profitable operations was underground gambling. Hidden rooms in karaoke bars, back rooms in restaurants, and entire buildings leased under fake names, ran poker games, mahjong, and sports betting. Profits were enormous. Police crackdowns came and went, but Shin always seemed to know when and where. Rumors swirled of officers on payroll, of detectives who warned the gang in advance. None of it ever stuck to him directly. Shin also dabbled in the dark edges of society's appetite, illegal dogfighting, for example. Though he was in his 70s at the time, he was later charged with organizing and profiting from dogfights in the early 2000s. It wasn't just about the money. These operations reinforced his control, kept his loyalists working, and served as reminders that even in old age, he remained the center of a powerful network. As times changed, so did his image. Shin began portraying himself as a businessman, even a philanthropist. He hosted charity events. He spoke to youth groups, warning them against gang life. Some bought the image. Others saw it as a strategic mask. After all, you don't retire from being a don. You just become harder to see. But his influence extended well beyond the streets. In 2009, a family wedding linked to Shin became national news. Why? Because members of 3 Japanese Yakuza clans showed up. The gathering was so high profile that Korean police deployed over 200 officers to monitor it. Authorities feared it wasn't just a wedding, but a summit. Nothing overt happened. No arrests were made, but the message was loud and clear. Shin Sang-hyun was not a relic of the past. He still commanded international respect or fear. Even in death, his shadow loomed. When Shin passed away in August 2024 at the age of 92, his funeral was attended by dozens of old-school gangsters, some of whom had been out of the scene for decades. It was a quiet affair, no spectacle, but deeply symbolic. There was controversy, too. The mayor of Seoul, Oh Se-hoon, reportedly sent a condolence wreath. Public backlash was immediate. Was it a mistake? Was it intentional? The mayor's office claimed a friend had sent it on his behalf, but for many, the gesture symbolized how deeply these criminal networks had once embedded themselves into the fabric of the city, politics included. Shin's passing marked the end of an era. The Shin Sang-sa-pa of today is a ghost of its former self. Newer gangs have emerged. The criminal economy has gone digital. Cybercrime, cryptocurrency fraud, and online gambling have replaced dogfights and street shakedowns. But the structure, the discipline, the unwritten rules of hierarchy, silence, and respect, those remain. And many of them trace back to Shin Sang-hyun's legacy. He was, in many ways, Korea's godfather, not because he sought bloodshed, but because he understood power. He built a kingdom not by shouting, but by being the man everyone feared enough and respected just enough to obey. So the next time you walk through Myeongdong, as you pass the street vendors and the glowing storefronts, remember this. Beneath your feet once lay a city within a city, one ruled not by elections, but by tribute, not by law, but by loyalty. And at the center of it all, stood the Emperor of Myeongdong. Thank you for watching Crime by Chapter. If this case left you wanting more, like and subscribe so you never miss a moment.